theater mask. Talking about Kanjiro. Figured it was appropriate considering he basically wears a mask the entire time that we know him. I don't have the frowny one, I just have the smiley one. You know, comedy and tragedy and all that junk. Well, not junk. I love the theater. So, talking about Kanjiro. Evening Shower Kanjiro, or Kurozumi Kanjiro is his actual name, as we don't, as we find out later on. Okay, so Kanjiro is here kind of more to act as a contrast later on when it comes to when I review the other scabbards, or when I talk about the other scabbards, mostly because of the fact of the scabbards in and of themselves do end up taking on leadership roles, and since they are retainers of Odin, they do have like an authority within, mostly within the Curry region initially, and then now, I mean, several of them have been made daimyo of the different regions, like Inarashi has been made daimyo of the Curry region now, and Denjiro is now the daimyo of the Kibi region. So we've kind of seen some of that already. Some of the others are going to get, we'll probably see one of the other ones made the daimyo of the Hakumai region, and then, maybe another one of the Ringo region, depending on stuff, at least for the time being. And I'll talk about them, later on when I get to the other scabbards, because by then we'll probably have gotten further into Yamato's cover story and hopefully seen some more of that stuff by the time I get to them. We'll see. If not, I'll guess. I don't know. But Kanjiro is here more to act as a representation, obviously, of the lies, what he masquerades as for the whole time that we know him, for like his whole time being around Odin and the rest of the scabbards and everything, and then only revealing himself right before they head to Onigashima for the raid to fight Kaido at the Fire Festival. And it's kind of more, it's to also do a contrast between how the Kurozumis are as a family and the way that the Kozukis are as a family, because I have previously talked about when it comes to Sukiyake and Odin and Toki, and later on when I get to Momonosuke and Hiyori more towards the end of this series. The end of the Wano section of the series. Contrasting and comparing them to how the Kurozumis are, with that the Kozukis actually love each other. It's like, yes, Sukiyake, exiled Odin and everything else like that, but he was doing it, but he never stopped loving Odin in the process. He never stopped seeing Odin as his son. He still loved him and cared about him, and was very proud of him, of the man that he became and everything. And is now getting to, show, his how proud he is of Momonosuke and Hiyori, and hopefully telling them lots of stories about their father in the process, about his younger days, in the process of, getting to know them as well. But then we end, Odin and Toki adored their children and everything, and then Momonosuke and Hiyori, as I'll touch more on when I get to them, they adored their parents, and they love each other, and they are trying to do what is best for the country. On the other hand, as I went over when as I pointed out when I talked about Orochi, and as is going to get talked about here with Kanjiro, is the Kurozumis, or at least the current ones, Tama excluded in this, Tama and her family excluded in this, the Kurozumis that we really get the chance to know just manipulate and use each other. Higurashi and Senimaru manipulate and use Orochi to whatever extent, in order to get him to be shogun, in order to take Wano back, or in order to take Wano and then destabilize it from the inside, as I touched upon with the Orochi video. I made the comment that a lot of people think that Higurashi and Senimaru are either people who were actually from Wano and then became like agents of the world government somehow while they were outside of Wano, and then returned to Wano to destabilize it from the inside, and took advantage of this conflict that was already there between the Kurozumis and the Kozuki clans, and just basically amped that up and used Orochi in that way. Or they may have, actually been Kurozumis anyway, and then like the world government paid them to do this or whatever, and then they did it. They both died as a result of it. Higurashi specifically died because Kaido killed her, and then Senimaru just supposedly dies of old age not too much longer after that. But all they end up really doing is then manipulating Orochi into, running Wano into the ground. And then they do the same thing with Kanjiro. Orochi is the one who manipulates Kanjiro. And I'll be getting into that in a moment. But they're there, I'm talking about them as this contrast between the Kurozumi family and how they act, or at least in regards to specifically those four, Tama and such excluded. And to be fair, I don't think that Kanjiro's parents were bad people. And I don't think that Orochi's mother, who we see, was a bad person. By any means. They were caught up in this conflict of, sins of the parent forced upon the child because of what Orochi's grandfather did. Orochi's grandfather was evil for what he did. Higurashi and Senimaru are, bad people for what they did. Orochi is vile and horrid for what he did. And Kanjiro is also vile and horrid for everything that he does. For playing the friend and the ally and the trusted confidant and everything like that for Oden and for the scabbards and everything for so long, and then just betraying them and, revealing that it's all just a ruse. All an act that he was playing as this amazing, actor and everything. And I'll be going into that a little more detail, but I kind of wanted to talk about why I'm talking about Kanjiro, even though he himself is not one of the, he's not a member of, he's not like Orochi's brother or something like that, where he would be like a prince in this case, or something like that. But he, because of the position that he kind of shows is kind of why I wanted to talk about him. So, first of all, in regards to Kanjiro, he is... Well, so chronologically, he is 54 years old. Physically, he is 34 years old because of the time jump. He is also now dead. So, yay. And as I said, like, he is Kurozumi Kanjiro. His epitaph was also the evening shower Kanjiro. As, like, just what he is. That's kind of like his, what he's referred to as for quite a while and everything. His epitaph in Wano until the betrayal is revealed and such. And not too much else there. I'll be going into more of his life, obviously, in a moment, but I did want to touch on his devil fruit, the Fude no Mi, or the brush fruit, which is a paramecia. And this fruit is actually one that I really, really like. And given what it does, I love it. And I actually think this devil fruit would be a great one for either Usopp, because we know that he is a really good artist, or Carrot, who is also a really good artist from what we saw in Whole Cake Island when she, drew the pictures of Luffy and the others. So the way that this devil fruit works, the way that the brush fruit works, is that it allows the user to generate ink, and then they're able to draw pictures using this ink that they are able to manifest and control the drawing. And the skill level of the person in regards to their, art abilities allows them to create better or worse drawings. In my personal case, I am not very good when it comes to drawing necessarily, but if I had this devil fruit, I would practice so much to be able to draw so much better. Considering that they come to life, and we see this shown in the two ways that Kanjiro uses this. In the first part, where we see him, where he just does horribly bad drawings, and they do their purpose, but they don't do it as well as could be done. Like, the ladders, the sparrow, the dragon and the cat, and like everything else that he draws. And he's not very good at it. And also, as is stated, he is able to draw food that is edible, because we see him eating like lettuce that he drew. But according to Kinemon, it hurts your stomach afterwards because you are technically just eating ink. So yeah, that would hurt. That's not good for your stomach. But on the other hand, when he reveals what he actually does, like the fact, oh no, I've been, it's the old trick of, I'm not actually left-handed. And then you throw the sword to your dominant hand. For a Princess Bride reference. And he reveals that, oh no, I'm actually an amazing drawer and painter and everything, and he's able to make these super realistic looking things with like his puppet, the Odin puppet, and like the other puppets that he makes, and the bird and the everything, and the stork or whatever crane thing that he flies on, and different things like that, where he is actually an amazing artist. He's just been hiding it all along by drawing with his wrong hand, and by also just purposely making everything he makes look crappy. So, I mean, I gotta hand it to him. It was a great way of, using his power. I can't deny that. But if I had that power, I would practice so much on trying to improve my drawing ability so I could make stuff look so much better and use it. So there is that, and then he also has his sword, which is his paintbrush, which, well, it's actually just a giant paintbrush that he kind of uses as a sword, which is actually kind of cool, and I really like the paintbrush sword. It is Suji Shibai, as I think the way that it's pronounced, I apologize, and it means street death plum. And it's just basically this giant paintbrush that he is able to use as a sword, and we see him infuse his armament haki in it in Dressrosa when they're trying to use it against Doflamingo's birdcage and everything. And and Kanjiro has both observation and armament haki stated. Not all of the scabbards, because I think it's Neko doesn't have observation haki and Inarashi doesn't have armament haki, is like the way that it is for them, because they're opposites in that regard for cats and dogs. Also, kind of the reason I'm talking about the other scabbards is because of the fact that I already talked about Inarashi and Nekomamushi in previous videos when I talked about Zou, and I kind of just want to talk about the others too because I like them, plus this is my channel, so I can talk about what I want in that regard. So yeah, I really like Kanjiro's brush. I like his devil fruit and I like his brush. That's about it. So, into Kanjiro himself. So, as I said, he is 56, excuse me. No, he's 54. I was right the first time around. He's 54 years old, and the way that we see it, and this is what we get in the flashback where we finally get like his backstory revealed, is he was born and raised in this popular theater group, troupe that would go around Wano and perform and put on plays and skits and all this other stuff. And his parents were in the group. And unfortunately, one day what happened, and I don't know if we ever find out exactly how old Kanjiro is at this moment when this happens, but any age is, far too young to see this happen. Far too young or far too old to see this happen. One day, it is found out that Kanjiro's parents are members of the Kurozumi family. And this leads to a bunch of, this mob running up on stage and slaughtering them. Because it was still, I guess, okay to do that because Sukiyake, or Sukiyake's father, depending on stuff, hadn't revoked the law about going and killing Kurozumis just because they were there. Hadn't revoked the Kurozumi hunting law. And Kanjiro watches this. And this would just be completely and utterly just break you if you had to watch this happen. No arguments here. I'm not arguing that. It's the same reason why it's just like, Orochi's backstory in regards to what we find out, with him, with his mother being killed when he's a kid and everything, and then having to like live on the streets and everything and hide that he's a Kurozumi for so long. Those parts of the backstories are horrible for what they have to go through. Same thing with like certain parts of Doflamingo's backstory and such, where it's just like, I don't like you as a character. Well, I like Doflamingo, but like I wouldn't want to live underneath his rule. There's a lot of people I wouldn't want to live underneath their rule in One Piece. But what happens is Kanjiro then ends up running off, and he just kind of drifts aimlessly for a while before he is eventually found by Orochi, Higurashi, and Senimaru. And the way that they depict Kanjiro at this point in his life, in this scene where, Orochi is talking to him and giving him the devil fruit, explaining to him that they want to overthrow the Kozuki family and everything. They both start with K's. Give me a break here. That they want to overthrow the Kozuki family and everything, and that they want Kanjiro to help them and everything. And because Kanjiro at this point in his life he has the way that they depict him in the anime when they do this, and I don't remember if this is something that they show in the manga, but the way the anime does it is beautiful, beautiful and heart-wrenching for what they do here, is Kanjiro is just depicted as kind of this blob, wispy, amorphous thing that is very reminiscent of what the Kanzenbo ends up being at the end of his life, during the raid with like the last of his power. And Kanjiro is just shown this way, and it is sad and just horrible because he doesn't have something tying him to this. He does want to die. He watched his parents die, and he's a coward also, but he is a performer. He is an actor, and he is given this role, and literally it is the role of a lifetime. And he's given this devil fruit, and he's given this purpose by Orochi. And this is something very similar to what happens to a lot of children who are taken in by terrorist groups a lot of the time and radicalized and things like that, where it's like they find children who feel like they don't have a purpose, or who honestly don't have a purpose, but they have a grudge, and they can point that kid toward the person or the group that they have the grudge against. And similar thing is done with Orochi in regards to what Senimaru and Higurashi do. Now, in comparison, we do have other people in this story who go through horrible backstories, devastating backstories and such like that, and they don't turn out evil. Tama loses both of her parents. She does not turn out evil. Same thing, Izo and Kiku lose their parents. They don't turn evil. There's lots of other people who go through horrible backstories, and they don't end up being evil in the process. And it is a choice that people make, but in some cases it is just something they're forced down this road, and then eventually, because like Kanjiro could have chosen to actually go and join the Kozuki, the Kozukis and everything else like that, which is what happens, but he could have chosen to not betray them, to not send information to Orochi or whatever the case is. But that doesn't happen. And Orochi and such give him the Fude no Mi, and he eats that, and he takes on this role that will eventually lead to his death. Because he is he is supposed to insert himself into the Kozuki family up until his death. And he is, it's the role of a lifetime, and it's the role he's born to play, and he takes it up. And then we cut to at age 13 in the Kibi region. And there are these rumors floating around from people who say that there is this guy who keeps going around and stealing hair from corpses and passers-by to make brushes to sell so he can make a living. Which is something that should have tipped a lot more people off that this guy is not all there, necessarily. And, Odin and his group end up there, and they encounter Kanjiro, and via reasons on Odin's part, I don't remember why, but, Odin defeats him, and then eventually, Kanjiro just follows him around. He becomes one of, Odin's followers. And then eventually, as this happens, it's like goes and they, gather up all the rest of them. And then eventually, they end up in the Kuri region after Odin has made the daimyo there. And of course, Kanjiro, becomes one of his retainers and everything. In all of this time, as all of this is happening, Kanjiro keeps sending bits of information back to Orochi. And this kind of gets explained later on when we see Kanjiro or Orochi receives like letters from birds, and then the birds turn into ink because they're so well made, and their purpose is to deliver this message to Orochi, and they do. And then they just fall apart. And then, of course, we have it later on when, 6 years after that is when Itarashi, Nekomamushi, and Kawamatsu join their group and everything. And then, of course, Kanjiro is part of the group that goes to steal money from Yasuie and are caught and chewed out by him. And then he gives them the money anyway, and he encourages them to become better people for the sake of Odin and for Wano, and they do. And they all take Yasuie's advice, and they train and educate themselves. They refine themselves and everything. And then it gets to the point where now, Odin has become much more respectable as the daimyo of Kuri. He's turned Kuri around. He's built up the Paradise Farm. He's done all this other stuff. His retainers are much better. And of course, Kanjiro is part of the group. All of them go to the flower capital with Odin so Odin can visit Sukiyaki one last time, although they don't realize that it's going to be one last time. And then we get to, during all of these parts, we find out that when Odin would be giving Orochi money, because he would come and beg for money and Odin would give it to him, that Kanjiro would actually secretly give Orochi double the requested amount, just to, stick it to Odin. And then we get to when Whitebeard shows up. And of course, when Whitebeard shows up, Odin and his retainers go there. First, Odin tries to fight Whitebeard, and then they just end up having a big feast. And Kanjiro and several of the others, don't want Odin to join, Whitebeard's group. By technicality, I'm sure Kanjiro doesn't really care one way or the other, but if Odin is in Wano, he can at least keep an eye on him. But if Odin is out of the country, then that means that Orochi would have a little bit more free movement in regards to stuff, because Odin wouldn't be there necessarily as this looming threat. So we have that. And of course, Odin leaves, and Izo, Inarashi, and Nekomamushi all, of course, go missing along with him as they head out. And then during Odin's absence, Kanjiro and the others continue to protect Kuri and everything. And then eventually when Odin returns to Wano with Toki and their children, and also to get the poneglyph information, what happens is, Toki and the children are left, and she explains what's been going on out in the world over these last 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was, that Odin's been away. And Kanjiro, we also see the Odin is explaining that he has to continue his journey with Roger. He has to accompany him and everything like that, which makes Kanjiro angry. Again, it's like he can't keep an eye on Odin, but he also is aware of Orochi has already kind of taken over Wano at this point in time and everything else, and stuff like that. So eventually it gets to the point where 6 months later, when Odin finally fully returns. And during this time frame, it has been revealed that, Orochi found out that Toki and the children were there, and he tried to assassinate Momonosuke, probably the main reason they found out about this, of course, was not only would it have been big news that, like, big news Morgans, that it would have been big news that Odin's wife and children are in Wano, but that he has a son that they have returned. And that Inarashi and Nekomamushi have returned as well. And Kanjiro probably kind of, worked with Orochi to try to figure out a good time for them to attack, but it didn't end up going over very well. And of course, they were able to, they protected Momonosuke and Hiyori. Toki got injured, and that probably made Kanjiro annoyed because the plan didn't work. And then, of course, we finally have it when Odin returns. He heads to the Flower Capital. Odin heads to the Flower Capital to confront Orochi, and then, of course, Kanjiro and the other retainers stay and protect Toki and the children. And then we have it over the next 5 years that, Odin continues to, he made the deal with Orochi where he will dance naked in the Flower Capital every week, and he does. And, of course, Kanjiro acts just as angry as the other retainers about what's going on. And, about Odin, acting like a fool and losing the respect of most of Wano's people and everything. And is, he, keeps sending more and more information back to Orochi. And eventually we get to 20 years ago, where Odin has decided that he's had enough and he is going to go take down Kaido. And, of course, this leads to all of his retainers coming with him. And this is where they are finally dubbed the Akazayan Nine, or the Nine Red Scabbards. And they march off. They follow him into hell, basically. They head to Onigashima. And they don't quite get to Onigashima because, of course, Kanjiro had sent information to Orochi about their plan. And then that information was given to Kaido, so Kaido and his forces then met up and, fought the Scabbards before they could actually get to Onigashima. And Kanjiro, fights alongside the Scabbards and everything. He fights with Denjiro to try to defeat Queen and everything, but, And, Kanjiro was willing to die for this part and die not having everybody realize that he was the traitor all along. And, of course, in the process, this leads to Odin and the Scabbards being captured and imprisoned in the Flower Capital for 3 days, and then they will be boiled alive. And then... then we get to the point where it is the hour of legend, or the legendary hour, depending on how you want to phrase it. When Odin has, he's standing in the pot, he's got the plank over his head with all 9 of his Scabbards on top of it, as he is boiling and they are safe-ish, for the hour in an attempt to try to save their lives at the cost of his own. And, of course, Kanjiro is, acting just as concerned for Odin as the others are, and all of that. And when the hour is up, just before the hour is up, Odin throws them, and they all run to Curry. And they all make their way there. A lot of them make their way there. Shinobu also managed to get a hold of all of the Scabbard's weapons and return them to them. So this is why, Kanjiro gets his brush back and all the others get their weapons back. Their, signature sword back if they had one. I know some of them do. I know some of them had signature weapons. Kinemon had one, and I don't remember what the other ones had. I think Kiku had one, but I don't remember. And then we get into where it is Kanjiro, Kinemon, Raizo, and Kiku, who all are the ones who, and Kawamatsu are the ones who make their way back to Curry. And all the others got split up in various directions. But those ones are the only ones that make it back to the castle, where they find Momonosuke and Toki and Hiyori. And Toki explains to them that she is going to send them into the future with Momonosuke, send them 20 years into the future. And that it is, their job will be to then help Momonosuke and, help with freeing Wano and then to open the borders of Wano. And, and then Kawamatsu will stay and raise Hiyori over the next 20 years. And this is what happens. They, all, those 4 scabbards, and then Momonosuke, Toki uses her powers to send them into the future. And then she goes off and dies after, everything else. Then we cut to 20 years in the future, because 20 years in the future now. And the group land at the ruins of Curry Castle. And they end up finding some of the allies that they have there, and they find out about the crescent moon mark and everything. And then they realize that, okay, well, it's not safe for a lot of us to stay here. And Kiku is the one who stays behind to gather information about everything that's been going on. And then, because she can play, the demure little, although she's like, 9 feet tall? 9-10 feet tall, whatever it is. The demure little, tea house girl or whatever, and get, information from people that way. And then Momonosuke, along with Kanjiro, Kinemon, and Raizo, all leave. Raizo ends up at Zou, where he gets separated from the others. And then Kanjiro gets separated from Momonosuke and Kinemon in Dressrosa. And then, of course, Kinemon and Momonosuke end up in Punk Hazard. And there are several things that are happening at this same time. When Kanjiro and the others first land in the future, pretty quickly, once he has a chance, he sends a message off to Orochi about, oh, I'm alive, we're in the future, Toki sent us into the future, I don't know where any of the others are, but here's, our locations, for those of us that are here, at least as best as possible, those are our locations. And then, Kanjiro, he gives them the information that Raizo is on Zou, and that's how Jack knows to go to Zou to look for Raizo. And then we have it that supposedly Kanjiro, willingly gets himself captured in Dressrosa, is what happens, I think. He gets captured there, but not really anything is done with him. Yes, he is locked up and he's in one of the trash pits in Dressrosa, under the Smile Factory. But he's, and I'll get to this in a moment, but he kind of just stays there, and it's implied that Doflamingo knows that he's the traitor, because, and I'll touch on this in a minute, but when they have all the Dressrosa bounties up, Kinemon is there. Kanjiro is not. Kanjiro is not one of the ones that have the bounties on their head during the bounty thing, which is another sign to the audience that we probably should have picked up on. Also, he's found in a freaking pile of trash. So, what you doing, Brenda? What are you doing? Well, I'm stretching. Mommy, can I be on camera? Move. They have to see me. I'm pretty. Yeah, you're showing yourself to the camera. Like you big girl. Big pretty girl. This one got her hand on cookies the other day, and they had chocolate in them, and she wasn't supposed to eat them. She's fine. We've kept her hydrated. It wasn't a lot of chocolate, but she got her paws on them and ate them when my mom and I weren't home. You're not supposed to do that. She also tried to attack a rabbit in the yard. Rabbit's fine. I saved it. Yes, I love you too. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. Back to this. Hi? Yes, I know. Here. Okay, fine. I will pet you more. Here. Don't be a treat in the middle of the video, Mommy. They need to see Brenda. They need to see me. Yeah, I know. You're a good girl. And what ends up happening is, of course, so Kanjiro's in Dressrosa for a while. And eventually, during the Dressrosa arc, is when Kinemon, along with a bunch of the others, end up down underneath the toy factory. Dog. End up underneath the Smile Factory. And they find Kanjiro. And, he's in a trash compactor. He's in a pile of trash, eating a thing of lettuce that he drew, which does not sound appetizing. And what ends up happening is, he joins in the fight, and he, kind of helps. He helps with getting them all out of the trash thing with using his, devil fruit. And then he makes, like, the weird, ugly bird, which I feel sorry for. And then eventually it is, of course, he ends up with Kanjiro and a bunch of the others on the King's Plateau with Usopp's group. And what ends up happening is, because he painted these ladders to help them get up there, he ends up, accidentally leaving them up. And then, of course, the citizens climb up the ladders, and because, and they show up, and everybody thinks that they're there to try to, hurt Riku and Viola and Usopp and everything, and Kanjiro and Kinemon, but they're not. And Kanjiro, because he, is kind of responsible for this, he offers to commit, word I don't want to say, but, Kinemon stops him and everything. And then, of course, Kanjiro ends up helping Usopp, because Usopp has him draw the surprised Usopp projectile and everything, based off of, how Usopp looked when he ate the all of the hot sauce thing, the very high hot sauce blueberry thing that they had for sugar to eat. And he helped, Usopp has Kanjiro help him make that, and then he use that projectile on sugar and everything. And so all of that stuff, big, stressful moments there. And then, of course, Kanjiro, was helping at times throughout the fight, not really against anyone directly, beyond, like, sugar with Usopp, but there's not too much there. And then, of course, they have to deal with the bird cage as it closes in, and Kanjiro, along with Kinemon and Zoro, and then I think Isho shows up as well, and they're all using their armor and hockey on their swords to try to, like, push back the bird cage as best they can. So we kind of, we see that. Kanjiro helps with that. And eventually, this ends, everything ends in Dressrosa with, the big, Luffy finally defeating everything, defeating Dofi and releasing the bird cage and everything. And then Kanjiro and Kinemon, I think they're in the house. Are they in I think they're in the house, in Kuros's house when, they're in Kuros's house when Sabo shows up and talks to them and gives them a Viver card that he had made with Luffy's, fingernails or whatever. And so he's there for that conversation and gets to hear about some of that stuff. And then he's, of course, with the group when they are escaping Dressrosa and they get on board, Olympus's ships and everything else like that to, help them all sail away with the ones that would become the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. And he's there for that party and everything. And, so there's that. And then, of course, he's, with Luffy and his group in Law when they head off on the Going Luffy Senpai to make their way to Zou. And then, of course, he's part of the group that gets to Zou. And he draws first he draws Ryunosuke, who is the dragon, who is adorable. I agree with Robin on that. He's so cute. He draws Ryunosuke, and then they're riding up along, they climb up the back of Zou's leg, Zunisha's leg, to get to the top. And while all of this is happening, what ends up happening is Kinemon and Kanjiro get knocked off of Ryunosuke and they fall back down. And I think there's 2 times that they try to climb up the leg. The first time is because there's I think a blue tiger, and then there's the cat that they end up actually making it to the top on, I think. And it's the first one they try like I think the blue tiger first, and that doesn't go well, and they get knocked back down again, and it's nighttime, so they have to wait until the next day. So I think they just like stay on the Thousand Sunny since it's, you know, sitting there. And Kinemon kind of knows his way around the Thousand Sunny a little bit, from, you know, staying with the Straw Hats and such on the way from Punk Hazard to Zoe, or to Dressrosa. And then we have it that the next day they end up climbing and getting all the way up to the top, where they end up coming across, you know, Frankie, Brooke, and Robin have all kind of fallen asleep on guard duty. And they actually, Kinemon and Kanjiro actually have like the little monkey mink, Burete, I can't pronounce his name, I think it's French. It's not Baratier, but it kind of looks like Baratier. They end up, you know, riding up with him, and he helped, you know, they get to, you know, up to Zoe and everything, and they walk past the sleeping Frankie and Robin and Brooke. And then, of course, they're all shouting about, where's Raizo? We're looking for Raizo. We're samurais from Wano and everything. And, of course, Luffy and the others are trying to get them to shut up. And, of course, that's when, you know, Inarashi and Nekomamushi show up, and we have the whole Raizo is safe moment, which I still freaking love that moment. I did a whole video about that moment. I do the whole Raizo is safe moment, and then, of course, Kanjiro is just kind of there with the group alongside them as, like, they're learning about the whale tree and the road poneglyphs and the connection between the Kozukis and the Mink tribe, and that there is a connection between Zunesha and Wano and stuff like that, and learning some of that history, and, you know, going to get Raizo and everything. So he's kind of, you know, just kind of there as all of this is happening. And then, you know, and in the forming of the samurai mink ninja pirate, it's samurai mink samurai, whatever, that alliance. The Ninja Pirate Mink Samurai Alliance. I was like, I know it's somewhere, but, you know, they formed that alliance, so Kanjiro was there while they do that and everything. And then, of course, Jack attacks Zunesha, and then, of course, Kanjiro is like there while all of that is happening and everything. So, you know, and he's part of the group that ends up going to, you know, because they find out about Sanji and all this other stuff. And then, of course, we have the whole big, you know, thing where it's just like, okay, well, this group is going to go here, and this group's going to go here, and then this group's going to go here. And Kanjiro is part of the group that go along with Kinemon and Raizo that go with Law's group in the Polar Tang to get to Wano and start their kind of undercover setup in Wano, and they, you know, they make their way there and everything. From there, we do know that at times Kanjiro, I believe, is still, well, okay, so first of all, I don't think we know the exact range for how far Kanjiro's creations can get from him, because we know that is kind of a question where we don't know the answer to. I would assume they can get fairly good distance away from him, but I don't know if they would be able to be from, like, Zoe all the way to Wano, and still survive. Be that far away from him. But again, we don't know, because the specifications for how long they last is, like, they last until they have completed their purpose, because Ryunosuke the dragon, you know, his purpose is completed when he gets Luffy and their group with Robin and Brooke and Frankie and with Robin and Frankie and Zoro and Usopp and such, get them to the top onto Zoe, top of Zunesha. And then, you know, Ryunosuke fades away. The beautiful sunset happening, that whole bit, where Robin cries. And Zoro and Law are just like, it was Ink Dragon, I don't care. It's like, just have an emotion, you two, that's not anger or drunk. Zoro's too well, excited, I guess, also applies as well. For Zoro. Law just gets either angry or snarky. or annoyed, or lost emotions, default emotions. But so I don't know if we ever find out the exact range for how far Kanjiro's creations can get from him before they would just, like, I guess, turn back into ink. But I would assume as long as they're given a purpose of, like, deliver this message to Orochi or something, or deliver this message to Kaido, or deliver this message to this person or whatever, that eventually that would, that they would still be able to go, but I don't know. That's just my thought. Then we get into Wano. And Kanjiro is there a fair amount. So during the time frame that they have been back in Wano, they kind of take up different places, and really. Oh, I needed your attention, Mommy. Yes, I know. I love you too. I know. You're so cute. You are so cute. Very cute puppy. Yes, you're very cute, boo. If I could look better, turn around enough to pet her and keep talking and still have the sound be good, I would. But now, if I could get you over here in this area, between me and, between here and the bed, then I could, like, pet you the whole time. And why don't we do that? We can turn the bed. I can do that. That doesn't work as well, boo. You could get me a chair, Mom, and I could sit there. Nice big comfy chair for Puppy to sit in. I like that idea. I know you'd like that idea. I know you like that idea. So, while the Scabbards and such are back in Wano, Kanjiro kind of takes up working as incognito. Do you not like that word or something? Takes up working as a fishmonger. You want out, don't you? Let's try this again. So Kanjiro goes on incognito as a fishmonger, which is just whatever. And Kanjiro is just kind of more there in the background. He does end up learning about, like, Shinobu and a bunch of the others, and stuff where the others are hiding under for their different things. But kind of the next main significant thing that happens where Kanjiro is there is, of course, he does send a secret message to Orochi about, like, the moon marks on people's ankles, about their allegiance to the Kozuki family. So that's how that information gets out. And then, of course, this leads to when a ton of the citizens have been, a bunch of the citizens have been rounded up and locked up in the cells at Ebisu Town. Or locked up at the prison gallery in the Flower Capital, excuse me. And what we end up seeing is Kanjiro is just kind of there while a bunch of this stuff is happening, as, like, Shinobu is arguing with Law about his crew members being captured and different things like that, about them being, that they spilled the beans or whatever, but they hadn't. It was Kanjiro, of course. And then, of course, we get into what happens with Yasu. And Kanjiro does end up watching as Yasuie is, executed and stuff. And he is saddened by this. But again, it is kind of this question where you're like, is he playing at being sad? Or is he actually sad? And where are his real emotions in this setup? How much of this is just him acting and pretending to have these emotions for these people that he's been around for so long? And everything else like that. And how much of it is real, like he actually cared about Yasuie and everything and thought he was a good person, but because he's, playing this role of a lifetime, he's still going to keep giving information to Orochi. And, there is kind of like these what-if scenarios where, like, well, what if someone figured out that Kanjiro was the traitor sooner, so that way he couldn't give this information out, and maybe Yasuie wouldn't have died. Or maybe Yasuie at least could have been saved or something. There is kind of that question there of like, well, what if that had happened, or if, blah, 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 if they had figured out that he was the traitor sooner. How different would things have been? And it all depends on like when they find out whether or not he's the, find out if he's the traitor, determines like what else would be different. But what ends up happening is, of course, after Yasu's death, Kanjiro is one of the ones that watches as the execution happens and everything, and then he is the one who actually ends up, that they manage to retrieve Yasuie's body, and they return it to Ebisu Town, and then they promise the villagers that they will give it a proper burial, and they do that along, Yasuie is buried then alongside, his grave is alongside the one that they make for Pedro. Not that Pedro was there. So Kanjiro at least allows that to happen, but I think that would have been something a lot harder for him to hide. Also, there's like a few others. I think Kinemon is part of the group that go and help bury Yasuie, so that would be a harder thing for Kanjiro to just pretend to do or something in that regard. So we have that. And then shortly after that is, of course, when the group find out that Hiyori is alive. They don't find out that she was Komurasaki. That's not information that Kanjiro gets, because Kanjiro passes on this information to Orochi that Hiyori is alive and that she's somewhere in the Ringo region, but he doesn't know about her being Komurasaki, so he can't give that information to Orochi. And then we get into where it is time for the Scabbards and Momonosuke plus Shinobu to head out. And they all head out toward the port. I think it's Habu Port or whatever, the port where they're supposed to meet. The dog is back. Finish recording. I'm still in recording. Bumblebee. Boop. Careful, or you're gonna knock him off the bed. And we get to that moment, of course, in this moment is we get all the flashback and everything for like what happened for Odin's life and everything. And they arrive at the port, and of course we find out that no one is waiting there for them at the rendezvous point. And it's raining and storming and looking horrible. And the group are like, we must carry on, and they all climb into this little dinghy that's sitting there, and they all head out. And then somehow in this moment, someone brings up the fact that I think it's Kinemon who finally is just like, he thinks about the possibility of a traitor being among them for something that would have happened that would have revealed some of these different plans. And then, of course, at that point in time, Kanjiro, air quotes, reveals that he is the traitor. And I don't remember if this is right at the end of the chapter or in the middle of the chapter, but like it's very dramatic for, of course, how they do it and everything. And the others, none of them, take it seriously and everything. And then they, the clone reveals something. Her bumblebee fell off the back of the bed. That seems more like a you problem than a me problem, Brenda. You can go get it. Huh. She's being mean, everybody. Mommy is being mean to me in the internet world. Oh. Flip. Go get it. You can get it. Um, she'll stare at me until she either lays down or decides to go get it herself. She won't go get it herself. And what ends up happening is, of course, Kanjiro, he's revealed that the clone reveals that he is actually the traitor and everything, and then eventually it results in Kinemon beheading the clone, and then it just melts into ink in the rain. See, she laid down. The clone melts into ink in the rain, and then they look over on the shore and they see that Momonosuke has been captured by Kinemon, or by Kanjiro, and that Shinobu is tied up. And we get this whole reveal where Kanjiro is just like, I'm the traitor, I've been the traitor all along, I am actually Kurozumi Kanjiro, and all of this stuff. And he makes this big reveal and everything, and that he's the one that, made these, sent this information to Orochi all this time and everything. Betraying them this whole time, that he's been an actor, this is a role that he's been playing. And then, of course, all of the scabbards are, of course, just like, no, that can't be. How could you? You've been with us so long. How could you betray Lord Odin and everything? After everything that he's done for you and all of this. And Kanjiro is just like, it was a plan, it was a play, it was an act, it was a role. And it's, all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. Not quite that eloquently, but you get the idea. And what ends up happening is, this is, of course, when the Straw Hats show up, along with the kid and the Heart Pirates. They show up along with the rest of all of the allies that were showing up. And Kanjiro paints this crane type of a thing. And he then tries to attack them. And, of course, Denjiro has shown up and made his reveal. That he's not Kuroshiro, that he's Denjiro and everything. And, of course, Kanjiro is just angry about all of this. And he's got Momonosuke hostage, and they're flying off. And, of course, this is kind of where we get a very good demonstration of some more of his techniques. We actually get to see that he is a very, very good painter instead of a horrible one, because he makes this beautiful crane, and then he ends up using his power to do this. He does something in order to delay the others, where he ends up okay, so I'm trying to remember exactly what he does. I know that he does something where he makes it rain ink that is supposed to act as a deterrent or something against the Alliance and stuff. And he does that, and then he has Momonosuke, and he is mocking him and mocking Odin and Toki's legacies, because Momonosuke is being so cowardly. And of course, he's taking him to Onigashima. And at some point, while he's leading Momonosuke through the back rooms and such of Onigashima and such to find their way to where Orochi is, Kanjiro, as he's going, he has to keep beating up the guards because they don't know that he's actually on their side and working for Orochi. But in the process, Momonosuke ends up getting his hands on a knife, and Momonosuke tries to fight back, and this leads to just Kanjiro just beating up on Momonosuke. And then, of course, they arrive at where Orochi and Kaido are, along with several other men, and Kanjiro throws Momonosuke in front of Orochi, and Orochi is just overjoyed that now he has the last Kozuki, and he was like, and I'll go find Hiyori later and get rid of her and everything. And then he sends Kanjiro to go and deal with his former allies and everything, and he makes these the headless warriors on horses, and they're kind of like a mockery of just samurais in general and everything, because they're headless and everything, and he makes those, and he's and he's guarding at the back door because he kind of knows some of the plan, and that's where Kinemon and his group show up, and they end up fighting against Kanjiro, and Kanjiro clashes with Kiku specifically, and during this fight, Kanjiro is very badly injured, and the scabbards believe that he is dead. He is not, but they believe that he is dead. And, Kinemon, as they're leaving, he drops his hat on Kinemon, on Kanjiro's face. And then we cut to a while later during the battle, we have it that it's revealed that Kanjiro actually survived, and he uses his power to make a copy of Odin. And he uses this copy to try to trick the scabbards, and it almost works, except that Ashura Doji is the one who is able to see through it. And then, of course, Ashura Doji, jumps on the clone, and, the clone blows up, and, Ashura Doji is killed in the process, but that allows the others to get away. And then Kanjiro tries the same trick again. I don't know if it's the same clone or if it's just a different clone that he made, but he's kind of inside of this clone now, and he's still running around as Odin, and he finds where Kinemon and Kiku are after this is before they've had to deal with Kaido, but they are there, and I believe that's also Momonosuke is, I think, there as well. And Kanjiro shows up as, the Odin clone. And this leads into where he is taunting Hiyori. Or, not Hiyori. Where Kanjiro is taunting Kiku. Sorry. Brain fart. Where Kanjiro is taunting Kiku about the fact that she cannot bring herself to attack Odin because she still reveres Odin so much, and she can't even attack something that has the visage of Odin. And because he took her and Izu in when they were children and everything, and it's also, it's hard for her to try to fight against Kanjiro because of everything else that's happened with Kanjiro, and how he, it's still this whole thing where it's just that is one of the hard things and the horrible things about having someone around you who you think is someone you can trust, and then they do something so heinous and vile that it just, any trust that you had in them is gone. Speaking from firsthand experience here. And that trust is just gone, but you have all of these memories and all of these other feelings that are attached to it, but that betrayal is always still there, and it sours any of those memories, and it's horrible, and it's hard, and it's painful. And that is something that all of the scabbards are having to deal with throughout this, everything that's happening on Onigashima and everything, and what Momonosuke is having to deal with, and what Hiyori is going to have explained to her about Kanjiro and everything, and even the Straw Hats to a degree, but they haven't been around Kanjiro as much, so they don't have as much of this connection to him as the others, as the scabbards and Momonosuke do, and all of that. So it is, and it's a very hard thing to deal with, and that is kind of one of these things here where it's just Kanjiro has been around them for 20 years in regards to the scabbards, and still for Denjiro and Ashura Doji and Kawamatsu and stuff, and for Arashi and Nekomamushi, and then Izo, when he finds out what's all going on here, they've got all of these other, they've had it where they've had 20 years since they've seen Kanjiro, more in Izo's case, but 20 years or whatever since they've seen Kanjiro, and they would have looked back on those memories fondly at times when just thinking about Odin and growing up in Wano and the adventures that they had there and everything else like that. And that still hurts even more. And so it is this compounding pain that comes along with it. And, Kanjiro is just taunting Kiku in this regard. And Kiku tries to attack, but she's also still been injured because she's lost her arm already. And she tries to attack, and it doesn't work, and she gets stabbed by Kanjiro. And then, of course, this leads into when Kinemon steps forward, and he is actually able to defeat Kanjiro and knocks him down and, does the finishing blow, but Kanjiro's not quite dead yet because he's a roach. And we get these great moments from Kanjiro, these great lines from Kanjiro, where he is, talking to Kinemon, and he's but this was my, this was my, the you were my closest on stage comrade and everything for these, all these years, and now you have struck me down and everything. And, it's been an amazing performance and everything, and it was the role of a lifetime, and it was the role of a lifetime that no one was ever supposed to know that I played, because I was supposed to play it perfectly until my death, but I didn't for whatever reason. And then we get into kind of his last act, his not opening salvo, but his closing act. And this is when Orochi has, because like they're contacting each other through like the pond snails, and Orochi gets a hold of Kanjiro and is telling him to use whatever power he has left to fuel something that is based off of the Kurozumi family's rage and everything. And this is where Kanjiro does his final act, and where he makes the Kanzen bow. And he, it is this blob, because it's this representation of like this blob is this hatred, this burning, utter hatred that Orochi has for Wano and has for the Kozuki clan. And I look at Kanjiro, and like Oda did such great writing with Kanjiro for how he played this out. But for Kanjiro, like, he has spent the majority of his life living alongside Odin and his retainers and everything for so long. He's watched them grow up, he's learned with them, he's watched Hiyori and Momonosuke grow up to a degree and everything. And he watched Odin sacrifice himself for his country and everything. And it's like, you look at that and you're just like, how could he still not care? How could he still betray them? And it's like, you look at these many points throughout all of Kanjiro's life where he could have changed, where he could have decided to, no, I'm not going to betray my friends anymore. I'm not going to betray Odin and the others anymore. They don't deserve this, and they've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to betray them to Orochi anymore, type of a thing. And if that had been the case, things would have been different. Maybe Odin and the others would have been able to actually defeat Kaido 20 years ago. Maybe other things would have happened that would have been better. Maybe, different things like that. If Kanjiro had actually been, had actually changed his mind, had actually learned, or whatever, accepted frickin' friendship from the scabbards. But that's not what happens. And his rage of just being this faceless, formless child still, who's been given this role and has done nothing but perfect this role for the past, however long, is embodied in this flaming thing that burns and eats its way through Onigashima and is eventually, sent out the bottom, falling with Big Mom and the bombs and blowing up. And there's one tiny little, bit on this that I love, because when we cut back to when Hiyori has Orochi and where he's pinned underneath the rubble, and we have it where the little bit of the Kanzen bow shows back up again, and it like works its way over to where Orochi is. Orochi is yelling at it to try to, to burn Hiyori and attack Hiyori. And it doesn't. And it just attaches itself to Orochi and then just sets Orochi on fire. Which is poetic in that regard, and you think that maybe this is that little bit of Kanjiro that maybe actually cared about the scabbards and cared about his friends and cared. And maybe this is that little bit that was like, I shouldn't have betrayed the ones who were my family, who are more of a family to me than Orochi ever was, and burns Orochi. Doesn't take away everything else that Kanjiro has done, doesn't change it, doesn't make it any better, but, helps Orochi burn to death before he gets decapitated. So, last bit. Trivia for Kanjiro. So there's a bit of an irony here, because when Kanjiro's betrayal is being revealed to the world, the video game Among Us is actually very, very popular. And of course, Among Us, it's about finding this imposter among your group and everything, before they can kill everybody else on the ship or whatever. I have never played Among Us, so don't ask me. But there's like a funny bit there where it's like Kanjiro is kind of the one that is like is the one that's, you know, the imposter among the group and everything. So that kind of got, and I think Toei had like a Twitter post about it or something like that, referencing the game. And then the other thing here is that Kanjiro's setup in this is actually kind of his animal resemblance, because like lots of characters in One Piece have like animal resemblances, and his is to a hotogisu, or a cuckoo bird. And cuckoo birds are birds who will take their egg and place it in the nest of another bird, and then, you know, when the egg hatches, it basically acts as a parasite to the other chicks that are around it. And because it's bigger, it is able to, you know, get more of the food, and then it grows, and then eventually it knocks the other eggs or the other chicks out of the nest, and then that is how it grows. And, you know, Kanjiro is kind of the same setup, where he is, you know, put into this and in the process because of his own actions. You know, Ashura Doji specifically dies, Oden dies, Toki dies, and, you know, a lot of other stuff, you know, a lot of other horrid things are done in the same regard because of Kanjiro's decisions. So there is like similarities there. So that's what I have for this. This video ended up being longer than I wanted it to be, but that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.